Welcome to the OncoPT podcast, where you'll learn from oncology experts, practitioners, and patients to help you on your journey to become a confident and competent OncoPT. Here's your host, Elise Cantu.
Hey there, OncoPT, and welcome back to this episode of the OncoPT podcast. I am so excited to be back in the studio today. And by studio, I do mean my house, right? Like I do record out of my house. But it has been a hot minute since I've been behind the mic recording between the start of school, CancerCon, which I do have a recap episode coming up later this month, and also getting sick a little earlier in September. It has been a minute since we've been here recording. So I'm so excited to be back. Thank you so much for joining me and for your patience over these past couple weeks. Let's get right into our topic today, because I bet it's probably burning a hole in your brain by now. If you haven't already started to pick up, it is September, and that means that it is officially ABPTS Oncology case report crunch time. If you missed it, September 30th is the final deadline to submit your application and your case report in order to apply to submit for the 2025 ABPTS Oncology Specialty Certification exam. Now, there is the early deadline in June. Listen, that has passed. All right, we are firmly in September. We have 20 days until that deadline comes. And this episode is all about how to break down your writing strategically, because I know that you do not have all the time in the world to get this case report done, right? We're going to jump right into why you should start with the narrative of your case. I'll talk about what that is, why that's so important, how to piece together the rest of your case report once you've established the narrative of your case, and ultimately how to avoid the common pitfalls that will absolutely derail your progress as you go through writing your case report. I'm also going to share some tips on how to budget time, not only for the reviewing process of you reviewing your own case report, but also for other people, extra sets of eyes to review your case report so that you still have the time to make necessary tweaks before the deadline actually hits. Now, whether you're just getting started on your case report or you need the final push to get across the finish line with your case report, this episode is going to give you the roadmap you need to actually get your case report across that finish line. So let's get into it. Now, you can find a lot of this first information on the candidate guide that is located on the ABPTS website. I'm going to break down kind of the bits and pieces that you need to actually kind of get started today. Now, I want to start right off the bat. If you're a person, if you are a PT that is like, I like to get things done way ahead of time because I hate feeling stressed, and my case report is already half written. Amazing, friend. I love that for you. Congratulations. And I mean that with all sincerity. If you, on the other hand, are maybe a bit of a procrastinator, like myself, and you thrive under the rush, the crunch of a deadline, or things just got away from you and you're now looking at the calendar thinking, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to finish my case report, which is exactly where I found myself a few years ago when I was writing my own case report. Do not worry, because this episode is going to be helpful for you no matter where you fall along that spectrum, of writing your case report. So first and foremost, in your ABPTS Oncology case report, you must have, per the rubric that is used to rate and grade your case report, you must have the following sections: a title, abstract, keywords, introduction, a timeline of episode of care, your purpose statement, the narrative of case, and this narrative of case includes several subsections. So patient demographics and background information, examination, evaluation and diagnosis, prognosis and plan of care, interventions, follow-up, and outcomes. And then outside the narrative of case, we have the discussion with any scientific references, and then the conclusion and post-case reflections. Now, hearing that, or if you're following along on the show notes for this podcast episode, it can be really daunting to write a case report, especially when you're staring down this long list of required sections for your case report. And as you get started writing, it is very easy to get stuck or feel paralyzed when you try to tackle your case report in order like that. So starting with the title and then the abstract and the introduction. But here's the secret that is not talked about a lot of times, and it is the easiest way to not get stuck when starting to write your case report. You do not need to write your case report in the exact order that it's presented. So what I mean by this is don't start with the title and then the keywords and then the abstract or whatever that is, okay? That is actually the very opposite of what you should be doing. You should not start and just write section by section when you get to the application. So when you get to the application, I do have a tutorial that I will link in today's show notes. You'll see that when you actually go to put in your case report, writing into the application, there are different text boxes for each of those sections. When you are initially drafting and writing your case report, do not go in order. And here's why. That is the easiest way to get stuck or tripped up. Now, when we read case reports, right, we start with the title and then usually keywords and the abstract and then the introduction, right? That's how we read, okay? But when you're writing your case report, you should absolutely not do this, because this is you basically trying to piecemeal together all the different amazing goodness and wisdom that you have learned from this particular case, this patient case, and you're trying to force that into this very narrow box. Easiest way to get stuck, paralyzed, and frankly never finish your case report. Instead, here is the exact method that I teach my students inside my signature program, Case Report Writing Workshop, and we're going to go through that now. So step by step, here's what I want you to do. Number one, you need to start with the narrative of the case. Remember, that is that big, bulky section in the middle of those list of required sections we talked about previously. This here, again, patient demographic, background information, examination, evaluation, diagnosis, prognosis, plan of care, interventions, follow-up and outcomes, et cetera, et cetera. This, my friend, is the bulk of your case report. This is probably going to be like 75 to 80% of the case report that you write. It is huge. And this is where we're going to start. And the reason that it is so important to start with this particular section, this is a lot of facts, right? This is stuff that happened. Now, not all of it, right? There is a little bit of, interpretation and assigning clinical meaning in the diagnosis and then the follow-up and outcomes, etc. But a lot of this is what happened. What did you do with that patient? What were the things that you identified? What were things you were working on in your established plan of care and your treatments with this patient, right? This is all very historical. And this is why I say it's kind of like fact-based here. And so this is where you can really pull in patient notes and documentation to really kind of lay out the story of what happened here. And by diving into the narrative of your case first, instead of those other sections that we mentioned previously, you're laying down the foundation for your entire case report. Every other section of your case report is going to come from or be pulled from the narrative of the case, okay? Think of the narrative of the case as like the meat and potatoes of your meal. This is the bulk of your dinner plate. This is where you're going to get a lot of those great nutrients that are going to keep you full, that are really going to set the standard of what is going to be covered and then expanded upon throughout your case report. Now, when you write your case narrative first, this is helping you to clarify the story or again, kind of the history of your interactions with this particular patient, right? You're connecting all of the clinical dots, those key points, those interactions you had with the patient. And by doing this, you also help to align the sequence of events, because a lot of your case report is going to be very historical in nature, right? First, this happened, and then this happened. And when we do this, this also helps us to really lay out what kind of progress our patient made during that course of events, right? During your plan of care with that particular patient. And then you can also start to tie in what were those critical decisions that you made as a specialty clinician in oncology that ultimately helped your patient achieve XYZ, right? Whatever that is. And so by being abundantly clear here, by clarifying that case story, this is really going to help you establish the flow of your case. And again, this is where we're going to pull out a lot of the information that you will end up including in other sections of your case report, whether that's the introduction, your purpose statement, your discussion, etc. As we mentioned, by doing this, this is really going to inform a lot of what you include in those other sections of your case report. So think of the case narrative as kind of it's almost like a reference guide. I'm trying to think of, when I'm looking, like if I'm trying to get to a brand new city that I've never been to before, my case narrative is a lot of times like the roadmap. Generally, if I'm going to drive from here to Las Vegas, I've never driven to Las Vegas before, for example. I know generally that I need to go west from Texas to get to Las Vegas. But if I drove straight west, I probably wouldn't get to Las Vegas because there's probably a little bit of northwest that I need to go. I don't know which roads to take. But by starting with your case narrative, this is going to lay out firmly, okay, not just I know my final destination, but what are the steps I need to take to actually get there? What are the different roads? What are the different turns? What are the different rest stops I need to take? And where would those rest stops best be taken as I'm driving from Texas to Las Vegas, for example? So I use this as an example of when you start with your case narrative, this is going to help you decide on everything else, every other component, interesting tidbit, relevant information to include in other sections of your case report. So this is why that case narrative is really like a roadmap here. This also helps you ease any writer's block you come up against. And I want to say with certainty, you will come across some writer's block. That's just human nature. That's just how we are. We're not machines. We're not computers. We're not ChatGPT where we can just come up with stuff and boom, 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 right? Your brain has to sift through a lot of information. And so by starting with the case narrative, which again is a little more focused on like facts and events, what happened? This happened, then this happened. This is how the patient responded to this thing. So this is a little more concrete. It's not as abstract or maybe, interpretive as maybe some other sections. And so when you're able to do this part first, which again is like recalling facts, referencing patient notes of what happened, how did the patient respond, and then what happened, this helps you build momentum and ultimately avoid getting bogged down in the details, in the nitty-gritty of your case report immediately. And so by doing this is where that momentum really starts to kick in. And so you actually see more progress before you have to kind of slow down and start to, I'm using the word interpret a lot. I want to use like a different word here, where you really have to start slowing down and explaining a little more of your clinical judgment, or where you're maybe trying to incorporate different scientific references into your case report. Those parts are very important, and I don't want to say that they're not important, but by starting with the case narrative first, and instead of doing what I did, this is one of the big mistakes that I've made, is I tried to start with the references first, my research, and then write around the references and the research. Again, this is partially why I started writing my case report way back in like April or May. And then I took a big break during the summer because I was overwhelmed. And then I crammed my case report in September, 2 weeks before the deadline. Again, I do not recommend that. And then lastly, one of the major benefits of starting with your case narrative here is that it helps to highlight gaps early. And again, this is why I really like to push off incorporating references until later, because once you write the case narrative, or at least most of it, you can start to identify, where am I maybe missing some information? Where is my clinical reasoning? That's a phrase I was looking for earlier. When does my clinical reasoning maybe need a little more backup? right, from the literature. Or, hey, I used this technique with this patient because while it's maybe not proven effective with this particular diagnosis, we see this similarly implemented over here in the research with this diagnosis, for example. By doing this, you can start to identify where are the areas that I need a little extra. I need a little extra help. I need to spend some more time thinking about these things. I need to spend more time looking through the literature to find supporting references to demonstrate why I am a specialist in oncology. And therefore, that is all being, spelled out very, very clearly in my case report. Again, that's ultimately the purpose of your case report, to show the raters, hey, this person is a specialist. They need to sit for this exam. So again, by doing this first, you can identify those issues early on. So then you're not cramming at the last minute, trying to fill in these gaps, these big potholes in your case report, as you are frantically trying to also finish your case report for that looming September 30th deadline. So again, by focusing on the case report, we're, of course, really laying out the foundation. We are writing the, quote, meat and potatoes of our case report, but we're also making sure that your story, the case, the patient case, and the story of that patient is shining through clearly, logically, and in an engaging format that your readers will not only want to start, but also finish. It's terrible to read a case report that's boring, disjointed, and frankly confusing. And so by starting with that case narrative, you are identifying all of those gaps. You're laying things out in a very clear, easy to follow format that is ultimately going to make rating your case report easier and making it much more likely that your case report is going to pass on the first time. Now, after you have gone through and flushed out your case narrative, I encourage you to then move on to your discussion and your scientific references. Now, as I mentioned previously, your discussion is really where you are highlighting, here are the decisions that I made. This is why I made these decisions. Here's the reference, the literature to back up what I did, because it's not enough to simply talk about what you did and assume that your raters are going to say, yeah, that makes sense. I got it. You need to clearly demonstrate that your choices, your clinical decision-making is grounded in research and best practices and was thought through intentionally. This is going to strengthen the credibility of your case report. But again, what your case report's goal is to ultimately demonstrate to those raters that, yes, you are a clinical specialist and you can integrate best practice, literature, evidence-supported choices and treatment interventions into your plan of care with patients that ultimately are helping your patients get to where they want to be, where they need to be within the oncology world. So you probably have some experience with this, thinking back, way back to PT school days. But again, it's really, really important. Don't start with the research. It's okay to kind of poke around and be like, this could be a useful article, but do not start writing your case report by researching. That is one of the biggest pitfalls to avoid. That is one of the fastest ways to get sidetracked into side quests, which I'm very, very good at. Don't worry, this is definitely a mistake that I made and I encourage you not to make. It's so easy to get down what we call the research rabbit hole by doing this. So don't start with the research, don't start with the discussion, but immediately after you have really worked through your case narrative, then move into your discussion and start showcasing the innovative, forward thinking that you have that is backed up by solid reasoning based on evidence in the literature. Now, from your discussion and your scientific references, I would then move into your conclusion and your post-case reflections. Yes, the case report is not completely done here, but it's most natural to then flow from your discussion into the conclusion and post-case reflections. Here is where you're tying up kind of the loose ends of your case report. What are those key aspects of your patient case? What is the growth or the learning outcome or even the broader implications of your patient's journey that you observed and then are now integrating into your clinical practice, or that show that I am integrating best practice and solid clinical judgment and decision making into my practice? This is where you also have the opportunity to talk about what's the bigger picture impact of what you've learned on your case report to not just your other patients, but also to the rest of oncology rehab. And so again, this is a really great opportunity for you to critically evaluate your own practice and also think about what's the 30,000-foot view. And this is where I get like excited and hopeful. How could what you're doing and what you've learned and the experience that you've had with this particular patient help to benefit all patients who are diagnosed with cancer or diagnosed with, this particular diagnosis, who undergo this specific treatment, who experience this specific impairment or side effect, right? What does that mean for the rest of us? What can I learn from reading your case report and ultimately take back to my own patients? Like, this should be exciting. And I want you to think big here. Again, how are you contributing to the whole of cancer rehab and making it better for every single person who is affected by cancer? Oh, it should get you kind of excited. If you're not a little excited when you're writing this, I want you to kind of check in with yourself, because I want you to be excited, or at least get excited thinking about this big picture. Wow, what I'm doing is making a difference. It's making a big positive difference that is going to help not just my patient right here, right now, not just my patients I'm going to continue seeing, but all patients affected by cancer. Oh, it gets me excited. And I want you to get excited about that too, okay? Now, lastly, the last kind of big section that you're going to focus into is the introduction and the purpose statement. Again, it may seem a little counterintuitive that we're saving the introduction and the purpose statement for the end, or at least this late in the writing process, but here's why you should. Once your case report is nearly complete, okay, it's not completely done yet, but that's okay, you'll use this to then shape a very focused and targeted introduction that is ultimately going to set the stage for the rest of your case report. So by writing the, second half or the later 75% of your case report, and then coming back to your introduction, you already have, again, going back to our roadmap example, you already have a very, very clear, not only start point and destination point, but also how you're going to get from point A to point B. And so the introduction and your purpose statement are now going to set the stage. They are going to introduce us, not to use the same word again here, but this is where we're going to introduce and provide context for the reader to understand why this particular patient case is so important to talk about, to write about. How is it going to impact oncology physical therapy? And again, going back to our conclusions and our post-case reflections, you can take those and repurpose those or integrate those, and you should, into your introduction and purpose statement. So again, definitely encourage you here by following this flow. This is really going to help your writing and the information, the content, and the important parts of your case report to shine through in each of those sections. So as you're writing your introduction, the very kind of last like wrap the bow on the present, that is the introduction, is going to be your purpose statement. This purpose statement should answer the question that every single reader is asking themselves about your case report. And that is, why the heck do I care about this? Why is it important for me to read this? What am I going to get out of this? And it's not because they're already thinking negatively about your case report. We as humans are trying to get through a lot of information as fast as possible, and your reader is automatically thinking this, I guarantee it. If not consciously, definitely subconsciously. Don't make your reader try to guess what that is. Your purpose statement must succinctly articulate what your case contributes to the field of oncology rehab. Again, use the insights that you have identified and clearly laid out in your case narrative, that you have re-emphasized in your discussion, and then also talked about again in the conclusion and post-case reflections into your introduction and purpose statement, so that everybody knows exactly what they are getting out of your case report, what they should get out of your case report, how it contributes to oncology rehab, and ultimately, what the heck should I expect to get out of this case report? Now, at the very, 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 very end of your case report writing process is where we bring in the title, the abstract, and the keywords. Now, in very brief terms, your abstract is a summary of your entire case report. Simply put, what I did is I think I wrote one sentence. I think I did like a 4-sentence abstract. And again, you're very limited on the amount of words or characters that you can do. So make sure to check that application. But my general recommendation is like 1 statement for introduction, 2 statements for kind of in the middle of your abstract, and then 1 at the very end that sums up like, what is the point? What should the reader get out of? What should we take away from this case report? From there, you can really pull out what are the key words. And again, this is something that I would review my whole case report. What are the big themes? What are some of the maybe diagnoses or treatments or impairments that this person experienced or went through? Those would be some appropriate keywords here. And then I actually saved my title for the very, very end, mainly because I didn't know what to use as a title. There are some guidelines within the ABPTS candidate guide on what should be included in your case report title. I would really encourage you to check those out. But again, by waiting until the very, very end of that case report writing process, you can really kind of put together like what should be the most important part. What are the big takeaways of this case report? And then use those to inform you as you write abstract, keywords, and title. Now let's finish up the episode here with some practical tips for staying on track. Again, if you are like me and you are cramming your case report in at the very, very last minute, and you've got 20 days to get that, started, finished, and submitted, not to mention reviewed in the process, here's how I want you to tackle this. No matter where you're at, right? If you're 10% done, if you're 90% done, you need to have a writing schedule. I would encourage you to break down the remaining weeks or days that you have until that deadline into themes, so you are abundantly clear on what needs to be accomplished for each week or day. So for example, from now till then, maybe I'm going to say, days 1 through 5 or whatever I'm going to finish the narrative. And then the next phase is the introduction and the discussion. And then the next week, so week 3 or what have you, is where I'm going to review and polish my case report. Again, these are examples, but again, really identify what is that writing schedule? What are the big overarching themes that you are going to be focusing on during each of those again, whether you break those down into weeks or days, whatever works for you, friend. As you're doing this, I also want you to set milestones and deadlines for yourself, so you stay on track and so you avoid as much of that last minute stress as possible. It's crucial for you to break down that big September 30th deadline into smaller and more, frankly, multiple mini deadlines. So break down the different writing things that you have to do into smaller, manageable tasks. Maybe this is drafting the discussion, gathering references, and I want you to assign each of those tasks to a specific deadline. And here's the important part. You can't just establish those deadlines. You have to stick to them. And by sticking to those deadlines, these are going to help you remain accountable to yourself, Also following a very clear roadmap that you have laid out, which also helps to make the whole case report writing process less overwhelming. It doesn't have to feel like a looming thundercloud above you. It could just be little rainstorms that you sprinkle throughout the rest of September. So by setting and adhering to these deadlines, you can make progress and see yourself making that progress in the grand scheme of your case report. So it doesn't just, again, look like, one big case report. Take it day by day as you are approaching that big September 30th deadline. One last thing that a lot of people don't do is they don't account for reviewing time at the end of their writing. Again, we're so focused on the writing process, which is important. We don't account for reviewer time to make sure that our case report is nice and polished. You need to have at least one reviewer look over your case report before you submit it to ABPTS. I would encourage you to have multiple if possible. So I think I had my husband look over my case report, and he had a PT perspective, right? He's also a physical therapist. Even though he's not in oncology, he could at least follow along and say, okay, this makes sense. I don't understand this. Where are you going with this? I also had my sister look over it. Again, she's not in physical therapy. She is oncology, but she also can really cut through my writing and say, this makes no sense whatsoever. Can you please fix this? Because I don't understand what the heck you're saying. Always a good perspective. And then I also had my former clinical instructor who had a ton of oncology knowledge. She was able to really sift through from that specialist perspective. And again, I think I went a little overboard. 3 was probably like maybe 1 too many, but I would say at least one reviewer needs to go over your case report. And you need to make sure that they have enough time to do that and then get the case report back to you before you eventually plan to submit. So what you need to do is you need to line up your reviewer or your reviewers now, today. If you take one action step for today from this episode, you need to identify who are the people you're going to ask to review your case report, and when do you want them to have your case report back to you so that you can look over their feedback, incorporate it, polish your case report, and then submit it by that September 30th deadline. They need to be able, your reviewers need to be able to commit the time to do that, because you don't want somebody to skim your case report and give it back to you without really being able to sit with it and provide you insight into, this is working, this is not working, this is what I would suggest you to change. So again, if nothing else today, make sure that you reach out to those potential reviewers, see if they can commit that time, establish what those deadlines are, like when you're going to get them the case report, when they're going to give it back to you, so that again, you still have time to clean it up before you eventually submit it to ABPTS. Now, if you're ready to start and finish your case report by the September 30th deadline, then you are going to love my free masterclass, the 3-step framework to a finished case report. Here's what you're going to learn in my masterclass. The 3 biggest mistakes to avoid when writing your case report, the secrets to finishing your case report no matter what patient case you've selected, and my proven 3-step framework for starting and finishing your case report. You can watch the free masterclass today at the oncopt.com/framework. I have also included those links in the show notes, and I would highly encourage you to check that out. Again, free masterclass. It is 1 hour. It's actually less than 1 hour. And it's going to take you through, again, what are those things that you need to know? What are the things you need to avoid? And how to ultimately get started, and what that path is for you to finish. Now, this free masterclass is an inside view into the method that I also teach within Case Report Writing Workshop. So if you are ready, if you're like, Elise, I need my case report done yesterday, then here's what I need you to do instead. Case Report Writing Workshop is our signature program that is designed to help you write a high-quality oncology case report that meets the rigorous standards of ABPTS. And I love what one of our students, Alyssa, has to say about case report writing workshop. She says, I just completed all of the modules in the writing workshop, and wow, thank you so much. Writing has always been a daunting task for me. And to now see the bones of a paper after working through your course, I could cry tears of joy. I mean, I don't normally get worked up about CEU courses, but this is one that I do get super excited about because I have seen this method work over and over again for my students who go through our case report writing workshop framework. If you at all know that you want to finish your case report in the time that you have left by that September 30th deadline, and you know you need help to get this done, you know that you are not going to get this done by yourself, friend, case report writing workshop is for you. I've actually had a student who sat through case report writing workshop in one day and cranked out her first complete draft, like complete, top down. First draft was done in under 8 hours. That's how powerful this workshop can be. And you can see the same results for you. So if you're ready to dive right in and start writing your case report to actually get it done, then you are going to love Case Report Writing Workshop. You can find that and enroll today at the oncopt.com/case report. That is all one word, no spaces, the oncopt.com/case report. And I cannot wait to see you there. If you didn't already know, Case Report Writing Workshop is approved for PTCEUs in over 40 states. You can find out that information at the oncopt.com/case report, and I cannot wait to see you in there. Until next time, this is Elise with the OncoPT. And remember, you are exactly the physical therapist that your patients with cancer need. So let's get to work.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the OncoPT podcast. If you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, leave a rating and review, or support us on Patreon.